And look at that. We are live on today's SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is our pre-show. We got about 10 minutes before we get started. This is the part where I have a look at all of my video feeds. Let's see, that one needs to give me a full feed. There we go. Where I check recordings. We are recording down here. You see the Cylon circling around there. We're looking at our streaming stats, which look very good. They are nominal. They are as they should be. And there's the chat room. Hey, chat room. How's everybody doing? Folks checking in from all over. Thanks for being here. We got a lot going on. Folks from the UK, folks from Colorado. Leo, or I don't know, Leo, this person in the chat room says, I passed my exam last week. Maybe just call you Ling. Call you by your last name. That I can pronounce, apparently. Maybe not so good, but we're getting there. We are indeed getting there. Thanks for being here. We got a lot going on today. It's all brand new Security Plus questions in this first hour. In the second hour, we are taking your questions, and you can lock those in. I guess I could put the link up. There it is. If you wanted to even put your virtual pin into our map on the screen, we can see where people are connecting from. And you can see that map by visiting that link, professormesser.com/QA. Thanks for being here, everybody. Hello, Malk. Oh, sorry to hear about the flooding in St. Vincent. It has been a very rainy couple of weeks, couple of months, really. It has just been horrible in that part of the world. And it was supposed to come this way this week. In fact, today was the day we were supposed to potentially have some type of tropical activity in my general geography, and it ended up not happening. So, yay. I'm pretty happy. I'm very happy about that. Here in Florida, we are always sensitive, obviously, to what's happening in the Gulf and in the Atlantic this time of year. Hopefully things will start settling down soon as the colder weather starts kicking in, which would be nice. So, Malk, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying safe. Hope things are fine with you. There is so much to go through today. I have a lot of questions that you've never seen before. So we'll see those, and we will absolutely open things up in the second hour. You can, of course, submit your question for the second hour at any time. So that works too. What part of Florida? I am in the central part of Florida. The Orlando part of Florida is where I am. So that's where the worldwide headquarters, where the studio is currently situated. I never know. There's no plans to move anywhere anytime soon. That's the idea. So we'll see how that goes. Oh, we've got a lot to go through. New York Kev says he's his last study group before your exam. Well, we're going to see how well you do. We're going to lock some things in on this one. It should be pretty good. There's a lot going on right now with all of the CompTIA stuff. And of course, we're getting near the end of the year. It's always a busy time from a holiday perspective. There's always things that have to be done, family things that are going on. So it's just constant motion, it seems, just constant things going on, which is exciting. That's always a fun thing when that happens, although it's sometimes nice when it's over. I have to say, the beginning of the year, I'm already looking like, when is the 1st of January again? We'll do that. We'll figure that out. But it's such a pretty time. And we're a little spoiled here in Orlando, Florida, because there's no snow. We don't have to deal with snow tires. We don't have to swap out or deal with anything cold. There's no worry about wrapping the pipes. We just do what we do normally. We wear shorts around, and that's sort of how it works. It's Christmas in the Caribbean, as Jimmy Buffett would always say. We have everything but snow. So true. It'll be nice. I do have also family coming for the American Thanksgiving, which is next week. It's a busy week, but we get to see everybody. That's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be great to see everyone and See how the family's doing. No, I really want to see my family. No, really. That I think most of us do, right? I would like to think that. In my mind, that's what I would like to think. So we can certainly work along those lines. We've got a lot to go through today. Another 5 minutes, 4.5 minutes, we'll get started. I think I'm in the market for a new video switcher. I've been using this one for quite some time. It was one of the very first 4K video switchers put out by Blackmagic Design. And I'm looking at a smaller, more streamlined one that I can put in my rack and be out of the way, have a small control here on the top. So I have plans. All of these plans, though, every time I have a plan, for some reason, it costs money. Every time. I don't understand. This is my boat, apparently, effectively. I just put the money, I throw it into that thing, and it eats the money. That's sort of how that works. But my plan is to kind of look at that over the holiday and see how I might want to do that. Because that would be nice to have that out of the way, have it off of the desk, have it underneath. Everything is just shrinking. The type of technology we have today and what we're able to do with this versus when we started this company 16 years ago, completely different. Dramatically, radically different. It is crazy. We would have killed for this type of technology 15 years ago. That's something. That's really a remarkable thing to say. We could not even imagined this kind of technology 15. I guess we could have imagined it, but would not have actually thought it would exist. The SSD technology and the large storage capacities and the real-time video processing functionality and the video editing, just everything surrounding that has been remarkable. It is, and now I'm looking to upgrade again into a smaller, denser, more capable set of features. So that's just how it goes. The problem, I'll tell you where the problem is. First, the holidays are coming up. That's a problem. And secondly is I need a new gaming system. That's the other problem. They're expensive. They're costly. They're a little bit on the high side for those because you don't want to get a low-end system that's only going to last a year. You need to get a higher-end system that'll last, you know the story. So we'll figure it out. We'll make all of that happen. So that's always the challenge. But I expect the beginning of the year, hopefully we'll have a new video switcher in here and I can have a little bit of a smoother experience for you and integrate things a little bit better on my side with online systems. I'll wave my hand and somehow that makes it make sense. It does to me anyway. We'll have to see how this goes. We got about a minute to go. What type of games do I play? Well, currently none because I don't have my gaming system. That's not entirely true. As I mentioned in the last live stream, I love MMOs. I like anything online with lots of people because most of the time I'm sitting in here by myself. So when I have that hour available at the end of the day, it's kind of nice to have other people to communicate with, other humans, other adult humans mostly adult humans that I can communicate with and see what they're doing. Got a minute to go. Let's do one final check. Audio looks good. Video looks good across the top. We have our presentation ready to go here. I think we're in good shape. I think we're in pretty good shape here. We just need to just have things go. Just make it all go. Hopefully it'll all work out. I would like to see anyway. Do I have kids? Oh, yes. Yes. We got the kids, but they're, I'm an old guy, so they're adults. Their last one of the three, there's one more in college. He's working through it. So the other are out of college. So yeah, that's the easy part, I guess. I'm the only children in this family, quite honestly. That's how it works most of the time. Well, with that, I think it is about time to get this thing started. We are at the top of the hour. Let's go to our keynote here. Let's look for a green light and green light. And there is the notification saying that we should start this. I think that means that we should Let's get that graphic up and do a live stream, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 2024 Professor Messer SY0-701. That is the Security Plus study group. Our Security Plus study group today will take questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and I will ask you something that you've never seen before because I created all of these questions this week behind the scenes, and we're going to see how well you really know those exam objectives. We have a lot to go through today. Thank you so much for joining us. We have instructions here that can help you also know how to participate. We'd love it if you are here live, if you would pop open a new browser window and head over to professormesser.com/QA. There will be a question waiting for you if you go to that link. The questions that are on these links, by the way, this very first question is one you may have seen before. It's the only question of this month that will be one we did before. We call it a rewind question. And the goal, of course, and the standing rule with all of these questions, of course, is to always answer the questions online. So you've got a link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. There it is right there at the bottom. Pop open a new browser window, go over to that link. The question states, a user is assigning share permissions on their spreadsheet for other users to access and edit. Which of the following access controls would best describe this process? Is it role-based, mandatory, attribute-based, rule-based, or discretionary? The real key with all of this, and the important part, our standing rule, is that you do not answer in the chat room. Instead, you visit this link, professormesser.com/QA, and use that link to answer your question. Now, if you're watching this on the replay, that link will not be available. There'll be nothing there for you to answer, but you can still follow along as we go through this today. It'll be great. I have another, we will come back to this question in just a moment, by the way, but I have a lot more that we can talk about. I'll let you know, of course, that our entire Security Plus course, if you've not seen it before, is available for free on YouTube. There's nothing that you have to register for. I don't hide videos behind a paywall. There's nothing you have to do from a subscription perspective. You don't have to pay for a Patreon. You simply go to professormesser.com/YouTube, and all of our courses are available for you to watch for absolutely free. I also have weekly Security Plus pop quiz questions that I put on the service formerly known as Twitter. You can find it at professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/X. I think I put an X link out there. We've got an Instagram link as well if you prefer to have a pretty picture with your questions. So you've got a little bit to go through and be able to keep up with what we're doing with Security Plus. And there's a lot that's happening in all of our courses right now. So make sure if you're not part of one of these social medias that you subscribe to our channel or our link. That will help us quite a bit. I'll let you know also today, all of the questions we're talking about will come from the SY0-701 exam. That is the current version of the Security Plus exam. It was released on November the 7th of 2023. So it's about a year old at this point, but that's very early in the life of an exam. We still have another 2.5 years before this exam goes away. So you have plenty of time to work through that. The estimated retirement will be somewhere around May of 2027. This is a single exam. That's kind of nice. It is a 90-minute exam. You could get a maximum of 90 questions. There might be fewer than 90, but 90 is the top. That's the most you can ever get on any single exam. And it is graded on a scale from 100 to 900. The score you're hoping to get, the score that you need to earn to pass and earn your certification, is a 750. So it's a pretty aggressive schedule or a grading policy they have, and being able to make that happen. So that is the score we're hoping for. If you're familiar at all with the previous version of this exam, and in fact, other languages of this Security Plus exam are still available in the 601 version until the end of the year, it is the same format as that 601 version. So if you're accustomed to a previous version, it's basically the same format, the same structure. Everything is effectively the same with both of them. We also have out on our website plenty of study materials. Of course, our entire course is available for you to watch absolutely free. We have other training materials that might help you, things like course notes, practice exams, and we'll learn more about those as we go through our live stream today. We also have downloadable versions of every single video and MP3 versions of each of those videos. So if you're someone who likes to take these with you wherever you happen to go, you can learn more about that at professormesser.com/701SB. That is for our 701 Success Bundle. Also, we have a replay of this live stream available immediately afterwards on YouTube. I also create an audio-only podcast version of this live stream. You can find that at professormesser.com/podcast or go to your favorite podcast listening or podcast indexing site. A lot of streaming media sites, you can also find our podcast. For instance, if you go over to Spotify and you're a Spotify listener, just search for Professor Messer and you'll find us on Spotify as well. Of course, our A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus study groups are, of course, available for you to listen to on demand on the Spotify platform and others. If we're not on your favorite platform, please let me know, and we'll make that happen too. You'll also notice that in the YouTube video description of this video, there's a lot of useful links and important things you should know about. But about a day later, about a day after we do this live stream, you will notice that a set of timestamps will appear almost like magic in this YouTube video description. They are able to be provided thanks to my marketing manager, Lori. She goes through and listens to this whole replay. Hey, Lori, how's things going? She is going through and she has to listen to this whole thing. What a trooper. She does a great job and puts in all of these timestamps so you can find exactly what you're looking for. You can go to any of these study groups, go to professormesser.com/YouTube, and you'll be able to see all of those. One of the things I think that is useful whenever you're in the process of studying is finding a way that you could speak and talk to other people that are also studying the same thing. Asking questions, getting clarification on different topics, or perhaps just pinging folks in the chat. I like to communicate and talk in the chat as well. You can find that at professormesser.com/Discord. We have a Discord of thousands of certified people and people who are studying for their certifications, all in this one place. It's a fantastic group. They are very welcoming, and you can create your own study rooms inside of this Discord. You can control them. You can decide who gets to come in. You can have complete access and group together people that are doing like studyings just to come in. Is that a word? Studyings? To come in and be able to study along with you. Find out more about that. We'd love to see you over there at professormesser.com/Discord. Maybe that will help you as we go through this. And eventually, you will need to take your Security Plus exam. If you're in the US or Canada, you might want to stop by the Professor Messer website because our vouchers are discounted. Sure, you could pay full price over at the CompTIA website, but why would you do that when the same voucher is available at professormesser.com/vouchers? And not only do you get a voucher at a discounted price, you also get a free copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook that I wrote with tips, tricks, and ideas that can help you during your study process, and perhaps more importantly, tips and strategies you can use during the exam itself. Might get you a couple of extra points. Sometimes extra points is exactly what you need. Find out more. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question we asked earlier, which was, a user is assigning share permissions on their spreadsheet for other users to access and edit. Which of the following access controls would best describe this process? Are they role-based, mandatory, attribute-based, rule-based, or discretionary? There's a number of different legitimate types of access controls, but only one of them matches a user that is assigning share permissions on their own spreadsheet. So let's see what you thought the answer is. We will close our poll and see what the answers ended up being. 65% of you say the answer is discretionary. 19% say the answer is role-based. And then we go down to single digits. Rule-based got 7%, attribute-based got 7%, and mandatory didn't even make a single percent, although somebody did mention that in there. 65% of you said discretionary. And if you answered that one, you got that one absolutely right, because that is the one that you as the end user in many operating systems have control over the rights and permissions of your own documents. So this is very useful. You can create a spreadsheet and then you can decide who gets access to that spreadsheet and what type of access they get to that spreadsheet. Maybe they're only read-only, or maybe they're able to both read and write. And you can, of course, set all of that. You as the end user are the one that has the discretion over who has access to that data. And so we refer to this type of access control as a discretionary access control. A DAC is the abbreviation for that. It is a very common way to provide that type of access, but it's also one that takes the control and the security of the data away from the security administrators. For example, it could certainly be possible for you to go into your spreadsheet and accidentally provide access for everybody in the company to be able to see. And of course, if this is not data that everyone should have, now that user's just made a mistake. And it's very easy to make that kind of mistake. Statistically, it's going to happen at some point. So in some organizations, you don't even have this choice as an end user. You must go to the IT security team and they can help you with rights and permissions. Discretionary access control is the one that describes a user assigning the share permissions for themselves on their spreadsheet. And if you answer discretionary, you got that one absolutely right. 19% did say role-based. There was nothing in this particular question that described how the user was assigning rights and permissions. They could be doing it at a user level, which means role-based would not apply. Role-based permissions means that you would set permissions for an entire group of people. For example, you could say that everybody in shipping and receiving can see this spreadsheet, but everybody in the accounting department can both see and modify the spreadsheet. That's very often referred to as a role-based access control permission. So hopefully that's given you something to think about from an access permission perspective. If you're not familiar with access permissions, make sure you go in and have a look at those. There's a lot of good information in there for you to be able to work through. Let's now do some new questions, shall we? This next question I have is not a multiple choice question. However, if you've never taken a CompTIA exam before, you may not be aware of this. A lot of questions when you go to industry certifications are things like the one we just did. It was a multiple choice question where there was a question and there were multiple options to choose from. One of the things that becomes a little bit of a challenge with that from CompTIA's perspective is you could have guessed and gotten it right even if you didn't really know what the answer was. So what they've done was create a series of questions that are anything but multiple choice. Now, the advantage here for you is that it's still the same exam objectives that you've been studying this whole time. And as I often like to say, as long as you know these exam objectives, you've done your studying, you've memorized this content, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question. And in fact, I'll give you a response or an example of that right now, and then you can respond to that because I have for you a performance-based question of the month you've never seen before. We wrote this one just for you, and this question asks, provide the authentication factor for each description. And I have for you on the screen 5 different descriptions. Notice this is not a matching question either. I was thinking of making it matching so that you could simply drag and drop in the correct authentication factor, but I thought let's make it a little bit more difficult, and I just left it as a fill in the blank. So this is the fill in the blank question and the 5 different authentication factors I would like you to be able to tell me about. So let's step through all 5 of these. The first one is a data center door lock requires a unique PIN, PIN, for each user. Which authentication factor best fits that description? Next one on our list is during login, a user receives a set of numbers delivered by SMS. I look forward to your cards and letters about how that may or may not be as secure as it could be, but that wasn't the question. The question is, what authentication factor is that? Third on our list is all company phones use Face ID to unlock. Nice. And my phone does as well. For better or worse, there are also advantages and disadvantages to that as well. Fourth on the list is a token generator on a keychain updates every 30 seconds. And then the last authentication factor is VPN users can only connect from their home offices. Those are the 5 authentication factors that I would like you to determine based on those descriptions. Let's see if you happen to know what those are. If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to use the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you know what these authentication factors are. For those of you listening in again very quickly, a data center door lock requires a unique PIN for each user. During login, a user receives a set of numbers delivered by SMS. All company phones use Face ID to unlock. A token generator on a keychain updates every 30 seconds, and VPN users can only connect from their home offices. Each of these has a clear, and I feel a distinct, authentication factor that you should be able to plug in. And we've tried to cover all of the authentication factors that you need to know from your CompTIA exam objectives. I don't think we missed any of them. So I don't know if that's a hint or not. If you know the exam objectives, I guess it is a hint, isn't it? Let's see how well you do know these objectives. And if you don't know anything about authentication factors, then you've basically just been sitting here watching me and trying to figure out when we're going to get to the answers, which is sort of about now. Now, I'll give a couple more minutes. I see a couple more folks are putting in their answers in this list. I want to give everyone available here. There was a question earlier about the discounted vouchers on our site. Those vouchers currently only available for folks who happen to be in the US, Canada, or a US territory. Unfortunately, they are not available in the United Kingdom or the EU. And I'm saying that as 2 distinct entities. So just so I look forward again to your cards and letters. I get some good cards and letters, by the way. Not actual cards, not actual letters, but certainly your emails keep things lively around here. So thank you for that. Let's see how you did with this question. Let's step through each one of these and see if we can determine what they happen to be. Let's start with the very first one on our list. We want the authentication factor for the description that states a data center door lock requires a unique PIN, PIN, for each user. Not an unusual thing. In fact, many data center door locks will use multiple authentication factors to allow you in. One common way to do this in a data center would be to use maybe a card, maybe an access card that you use on an access card reader, and it beeps, and then it expects you to put in a personal identification number. That's what a PIN is, of course. So that PIN is what we are referring to. The PIN authentication factor is indeed something that you know. It's a piece of information that's in your brain. There's no other way to get their hands on this. It's not written down anywhere, ideally. This is something that only you would know, and no really way to get that information without going into your mind. You'd have to perform some type of Vulcan mind meld to get your authentication factor of something you know. The next one on the list is during login, a user receives a set of numbers delivered by SMS. SMS, this is text messaging, effectively. It's how we would receive that. And if you are receiving a text message, then you have your phone with you. And if you have your phone with you, that would be something you have. So the only way you would receive that information is if you are the one with your phone in front of you. Now, of course, there are the idea of providing authentication factors through text message is admittedly very, very low security. Some would argue it's very bad security, and that's a good argument. It's not a bad argument at all. Most organizations will not use SMS as their method of distributing this authentication factor because it's so easy to spoof or modify where that message happens to go. There's no authentication method behind the scenes, or very limited authentication for SMS. So in that particular case, probably not using it at work. I use it all the time on things that are online, though, because online, we just assume that everybody has this. And of course, it's important that you have more than one type of authentication factor. Next on our list is all company phones use Face ID to unlock. This is something that's on my phone. I pick up my phone, it recognizes my face. There are certain legal issues that could be associated with that, but the ease of use is one that I really, really like. And so I also use Face ID, which means it's something you are. It's looking at you as a biometric, as you as an individual, because obviously being able to have that phone in front of a different person is not going to be able to unlock the phone. Our biometrics have gotten very, very, very good in the last 5 to 10 years, and Face ID is a very good example of that it's very hard to have Face ID give a false positive. They have really done quite a bit of work on facial recognition in general. Again, for better or worse, but that's where we are. Next on our list is a token generator and a keychain updates every 30 seconds. I had one around here somewhere. I was going to hold it up. I've got token generator keychains for PayPal. I've got one for Blizzard. I've got another one for something else that I was working with, and it updates the numbers on that keychain every 30 seconds. They're different. So it's giving me this pseudo random number that I can use as an authentication factor. So put in my username, my password, and then put that number that changes every 30 seconds. And obviously I'm the only one who has that number because I'm the only one that has this keychain with me. And because I have it with me, it's something I have. Sort of like the phone problem. The phone is sending you these messages, giving you those codes, and a third-party product giving you the codes. It's effectively the same thing. So both, of course, are something that you have. And then you have VPN users can only connect from their home offices. If you're in your home office and you're only able to connect when you're in your home office, maybe you go to a coffee shop, you can't connect anymore. Maybe you visit family in another location, you can't connect from their house. You have to be in your home office. And because it is so focused on the geography, on the physical location of where you happen to be, that is somewhere you are. Somewhere you are can be a very powerful method of authentication or a factor for authentication, because it's very difficult to think that today you are at your house and then an hour from now you try logging in from China. An hour from now you try logging in from Europe. An hour from now you try logging in from South Africa. We might think that maybe that's not you because we are not expecting you to be there. So if we can focus it in on what we are doing and we can focus in on who we are and where we would be expected it to be, that makes a very powerful authentication factor. And if you can only connect from one place and have that geography, then that is indeed somewhere you are. Those are the 5 authentication factors we were looking for. A data center door lock requiring a unique personal identification number for each user would be something you know. During login, a user receiving a set of numbers delivered by SMS is something you have. All company phones using Face ID to unlock would be something you are. A token generator on a keychain updates every 30 seconds is something you have. And then VPN users can only connect from their home offices. That would be somewhere you are. One of the things that is important for you to keep in mind for the exam and something that might help you answer a question on the exam is often they will ask you which of these scenarios would qualify as being multi-factor authentication. And so what they're looking for is for you to pick out the 2 different types of authentication factors that may be listed as part of an answer. So for example, if somebody said, if the answer is during login, you get a set of numbers delivered by SMS and a token generator and a keychain updates every 30 seconds, those are the 2 factors you use for login. Those are just a single factor. They're both something you have. They're not multi-factor authentication. So you would need to combine something you have with one of these others, something you know, something you are, or somewhere you are. So keep that in mind as you go through the exam. You could be asked for questions that talk about multiple factors of authentication. I'll also let you know that on the exam, we don't often get fill in the blank. I did fill in the blank for this question just to make it a little more difficult, but you don't often see that on the exam. Often these will be pull down options or drag and drop options that you will see. But for the A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, currently we have not seen fill in the blank questions, at least not yet. They could certainly add those, right? have them on the list. That would be certainly something you might want to consider. Let's, though, shift back to a multiple choice-based question, because after you do the first handful of questions on the exam, you will be in the middle of a lot of multiple choice questions. So let's go to this multiple choice question that asks, a security researcher has located an unprotected spreadsheet with a column of serial numbers, but the column contains asterisks instead of actual values. Which of the following would best describe this data protection? Would this be encryption, tokenization, masking, steganography, or hashing? Now, if you think you know the answer, there's your link on the screen. Please go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. The question again asks, a security researcher has located an unprotected spreadsheet with a column of serial numbers, but the column contains asterisks instead of actual values. Which of the following would best describe this data protection? Is it encryption, tokenization, masking, steganography, or hashing? If you think you know the answer, there's your link. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Let's see how you work with this one. I have run across spreadsheets in environments that have been sent across the network out into the internet at different locations, and people were sending spreadsheets that were not encrypted, in the clear, not password protected in any way. There was no security, and they were full of credit card numbers and expirations. So this does happen, but in this case, it's a little bit different. We have a column of serial numbers, but the column contains asterisks instead of actual values. So let's see how we do with this one. A lot of you locking in your answers very quickly. That gives me a good feeling that we might know the answer to this one. Let's see how you did with this one. A security researcher has located an unprotected spreadsheet with a column of serial numbers, but the column contains asterisks instead of actual values. Which of the following would best describe this data protection? Would it be encryption, tokenization, masking, steganography, or hashing? We will close our poll and see how you did with this one. Big numbers. 79% of you say the answer is masking. 8% of you say the answer is encryption. 6% say hashing. Tokenization got 4%, and only less than 1% got steganography. So this is something you commonly see. In fact, if you were to look at a receipt that is, you paid for something and they hand you your receipt, you'll notice that if you used a credit card, that the credit card number on the receipt is not listed. The only thing listed is usually the last 4 digits of the credit card, and everything else has an asterisk next to it. That asterisk that is next to it is referred to as a data mask. We are hiding that information from you and effectively anyone else on that particular receipt, that particular screen, or in this case, the column of data that's within this spreadsheet. This protects information that would be sensitive or personally identifiable information, PII, can be masked with data masking. The data might still be in the database. Behind the scenes, someone may still be able to see that credit card information, but anyone who's accessing it through the front end of this application does not see it. It is masked. And when it is printed out, it is masked. So we don't see that mask unless somebody is intentionally adding that to the application, something that's very commonly done in applications so that we don't see them. I don't want to see credit card information. A good example of this on my side is if you were to purchase something from the Professor Messer website, I have no access to your credit card numbers. They are intentionally kept from me, and I have no access to them by design. The only time I can see information is something like this, where there are a number of asterisks and I can only see the last 4 digits so that I can communicate with someone else. Oh, did you use the card number that ends in a 2512? And somebody goes, yes, I did, which allows us to at least know what we're talking about, that we're talking about the same credit card, but we don't know the credit card information on our side. Still remains private. Data masking is the correct number. 79% of you chose that one, and that is the right answer. There were a number of answers on here that could provide levels of security, but are not associated with an asterisk in this particular data. For example, encryption might allow you to hide this information and still be able to recover all of that information later. But in this particular case, a column of asterisks is not an encrypted value. I can't undo the asterisks to be able to retrieve the data that happened to be in that column. Therefore, it would not be encryption. Along those same lines, it would not be hashing, because a hash would also contain information that would be a representation, we often call it a digital fingerprint, of that particular original value. So hashing would not be the right answer either. Well, tokenization got 4%. Tokenization is a way that you could apply that particular value as a replacement for something that might be more sensitive. A good example of this would be using your phone to be able to pay for things at a point of sale terminal. It's not sending your credit card information over the network. It's sending a token of your credit card. And if someone was in some way to be able to grab that information being sent back and forth, they would not be able to use that to charge more information because it's a one-time use token, which is kind of nice. But it does not apply in this case, where we simply have a column with asterisks instead of values. And steganography is a way to hide information effectively in plain sight. That's not exactly a great description of what steganography does for us, but the steganography is something that can be used to hide data within other media types. And that can be very useful if you're trying to sneak data from one place to another without somebody knowing that you're doing it. But in this case, everybody knew what we were doing. It was a spreadsheet. It was a column. There was data, but it was asterisks instead of the actual data. So in this case, the 79% of you that answered masking got that one absolutely correct. That is the right answer. Let's do another one. Next on our list is this question that asks, a security administrator has found a third-party certificate that has the same name and matches the same hash of their internal CA. Which of the following would best describe this attack? Would it be A, DDoS, downgrade, collision, on path, or brute force? I don't know that this one is going to be completely what I think it will be. I think actually you might do pretty well on this one. This is one that we've set up so you can really break this one apart a little bit. The possible answers, or let's go through the question again that asks, a security administrator has found a third-party certificate that has the same name and matches the same hash of their internal CA. Which of the following would best describe this attack? Would it be DDoS, downgrade, collision, on path, or brute force? I think there's a couple here that could actually apply. When I look at this particular question, I think there might be two of these that could possibly apply in this scenario. Really only one if I was to really figure this one out. But let's keep going through this list and we'll see what answers you come up with and what answers I have. We'll kind of break this down and see what the different options are. I think this is one, if you ever get into the details of working through certificates and understanding the details of certificates, it can be really, really useful to kind of break down some of the different information that is here. And I'm looking here and breaking down certainly where the different options might be when we start looking at how this certificate might actually be put together. We'll have to see how we do on this one. A lot of people have locked in their answer, so let's see how you've done on this one. A security administrator has found a third-party certificate that has the same name and matches the same hash of their internal CA. Which of the following would best describe this attack? Would it be a DDoS, downgrade, collision, on path, or brute force? This is one, let's see how you answered. We'll bring up your list in here and we'll see that 69, almost 70% of you have said collision. A good number of you. I would say that is a healthy majority. We also have 21% that say the answer is on path. We certainly look at that one as well. Then we have DDoS at 3%, downgrade at 2%, brute force at 3%. So effectively a three-way tie for third place. In this case, it's a third-party certificate. So it's a different certificate than what we would normally have in our internal environment. In fact, it might have different names on it in different fields. There might be different parts of that certificate that are different because it's a third-party certificate. But it has a similar domain name, for example, would be a good example of how you might apply this one. And the hash is one that works. The digital signature on this one is valid. So this is a good example of where you might have different types of input, but it would give you a valid result, or in some cases, exactly the same hash on all of this. That certainly works out very commonly if you were to look at a digital signature, for example. And that's, in this particular case, I would qualify that as a collision. We're supposed to really have different hashes for every different type of input. But unfortunately, there are certain hashing algorithms that do run into problems. And eventually, statistically, you may find that there's certain cases where this can indeed happen. This is a really good example of one that I have on the screen. It's an MD5 hash. There are two different inputs. These different inputs, one at the very top and one in the middle here, these two different inputs. The only difference between these inputs is minor. Everything that's a red letter that's in here is different between these two. But they are different. And that's the real important part of this, is that if we look at this, it does have the same hash for both of these. And that's something you would not expect to have for different inputs. But it does happen with certain hashing algorithms or certain situations with a hashing algorithm, because there are only so many possible hashes that you could create. This one is just a little bit too close, though. And because of this, when researchers found this problem, they were very easily able to use this to create their own certificate. In fact, this is the example of this in December of 2008. They created a certificate authority certificate that looked legitimate when they ran it through the digital signature check, but indeed it was not legitimate. They made it themselves, and they were able to do that because of this collision attack. That is the answer we were looking for, was collision. That is what we were expecting to see in this case. Almost 70% of you chose that particular option, and that is the right answer. On path is one where someone would have gained access to information by sitting in the middle of a network connection. In this particular case, it was a third-party certificate. So they didn't have to sit in the middle of anything. They made their own certificate. So that's not a situation you would commonly see with an on-path attack. We have 3% of you that said distributed denial of service. There's nothing about this question that has any services being denied, so I wouldn't specify any type of service denial, whether it was distributed or not. We also have brute force. I guess if you were to go through and try every possible scenario of every possible input and create a certificate with every possible option and change I suppose if you had that many monkeys that were typing, you would eventually be able to create something like this. Not very practical, though, and it would not best describe this particular kind of attack. And then lastly, you have downgrade attack. Downgrade attacks are when you can take advantage of a certain set of processes or protocols that allows you to use a less powerful security or no security at all instead of what should be the most strongest or best security that you would have available. So it would not be a downgrade attack either. In this case, collision is what we were shooting for. About 70% of you got that one right. That is the right answer. And that's what you got. If you chose that one, you got that one absolutely correct. As you can already tell, there are a lot of data, a lot of things to know in this Security Plus exam. We have videos on our site, 121 videos in our Security Plus course. It's a relatively large course, over 15 hours of information inside of it. And of course, I would love it if you would read through, watch, and just get as much information as you can from this course. But I recognize that not everybody has that much time available, and not everybody needs to go through every single video. So instead of you having to do that, I've taken all of the information that's important from this video and I put it into one single document. This is my set of course notes. This is delivered both as a PDF version, that's the one that you see on the screen here, but there's also a printed version. That's the one that you see in front of me. So we have this in book form. It's obviously identical to the one that you're looking at on the screen. For example, if I go to the security controls chart on the screen, you can see it's the same security controls chart that we have in the book. In fact, the diagram that's on the second page there, you can see it's all the same. So we can happen to understand and get all of the important data, all the important text, all the important graphics like you see here, all of the important charts that we have in this document. They are all in the course notes. Another way to give you information that can help you with your studies and something that you can use to follow along as you go through the videos. You can learn more about that. You can go to professormesser.com/QA, professormesser.com/701CN, or use the main menus from the Professor Messer website. That would also be a good one if you're working on trying to find something that can consolidate all of this depth of information into one document. It is my course notes. Let's do another question on our list. This next question asks, a company has configured URL filtering on their firewall, but some users have been able to circumvent this security control. Which of the following would be the most likely method of avoiding the URL filtering? Would this be HTTPS, port security, jump server, 802.1x, or open proxy? A company has configured URL filtering on their firewall, but some users have been able to circumvent this security control. Which of the following would be the most likely method of avoiding the URL filtering? Would it be HTTPS, port security, jump server, 802.1x, or open proxy? If you think you know the answer, let's put the link up. There it is. professormesser.com/QA would be a perfect place to go to figure out the details. See if you know the answer. Lock your answer in. Let's see if you know which one of these it would be. As someone who formerly was a next generation firewall systems engineer, we were met with challenges like this all the time. We'd walk in and people would say, we're doing URL filtering. People are circumventing our security controls. And of course, our question then was, how are they doing that? What are they doing to circumvent your security controls? There were a number of different things that people could do. One of those methods is listed as one of these answers. Let's see how you did with this one. Let's see if you know what this one. I'm going to give this one another second or two to see if you know how to do this. Some of you that have circumvented URL filters are answering this one very quickly. We'll have to see how you did. The question again asks, a company has configured URL filtering on their firewall, but some users have been able to circumvent this security control. Which of the following would be the most likely method of avoiding the URL filtering? Would it be HTTPS, port security, jump server, 802.1x, or open proxy? Let's find out what you chose. We'll close the poll. And 55%, a good majority of you said the answer is open proxy, but 18% said jump server is what would do that. We've got 11% that say port security, and then 10% that say HTTPS. So 4 of these answers in the double digits, which is pretty interesting. And in fact, more than one answer could possibly technically be correct if this was not written as which would be the most likely method. And 802.1x, by the way, only got 4% of this particular connection. Of this answer. So the open proxy was 55% of what you chose. And if I was going to attempt to circumvent a URL filter, this is probably one of the most popular ways to try to get around a simple URL filter. A URL filter, of course, is a filter that blocks traffic based on what you are doing in your browser, primarily. That's what we think about with URLs. So if you're going to www.professormesser.com, you're going to google.com, you're going to espn.com, you're doing any of those, then then one of the things that can be done on your firewall or standalone URL filtering device is preventing you from accessing those. And maybe it's preventing it based on a rule that says if anybody tries to go to ESPN.com, we're blocking that site. Another way to do this is many URL filters will categorize large groups of sites. So there might be a sports group, of a sports category that would block ESPN. It would block Barstool Sports. It would block useful or interesting sports YouTube pages, block sports blogs. All of that would be contained within that single group. And there might be a rule that says just block sports, and it will block all of them in one fell swoop. So one way to get around that is instead of sending your browser directly to that sports site, let's send it to a third-party site called an open proxy, and we'll have that open proxy go to ESPN, and that open proxy will come through that mix and be able to give you the answer. So technically, you didn't go out to that proxy. You're not the one that sent that information in. So it's a really good example of how you can very, very easily get around certain types of filters. This is another good way to do that. But another thing that you might want to think about, and this is how the more modern security tools operate, is they don't just use one specific type of security control to try to allow or prevent different traffic flows. So for example, in this particular case, we're using this open proxy to get around a URL filter. Well, next generation firewall also allows you to add additional security checks, and it might look to see what protocol you happen to be using and what application you happen to be using. Next generation firewalls are very good at identifying someone trying to connect to an open proxy device. These next gen firewalls know what an open proxy communication looks like. So it doesn't matter what URL you're connecting to. It doesn't matter what IP address you happen to connect to, because open proxies, new ones show up all the time, old ones go away. You can't really block it by IP address. But by blocking it with an application identification with these next-gen firewalls, you simply tell the firewall, block anybody trying to communicate to an open proxy. And it just blocks them all. Just like that. So simple to be able to do that. So there's been times when I've walked into a location, they say, people are circumventing our security. How can we make our system more secure? I say, you just turn on that one feature. Turn on that app ID feature that blocks open proxies, and that's it. Suddenly they're blocked instantly. And it's almost like magic when you initially turn it on. So adding these multiple types of security controls can be very, very useful. In this case, open proxy is the one that they're using here. Maybe they're not using that next generation firewalls, and you chose right, 55%. I believe in these 5 options, that is the one that would be the most likely method. The other one on really old URL filtering, on super old devices, older firewalls, older proxy systems, you could potentially do this by simply enabling HTTPS. Those were the days, wasn't it? We're talking over 10 years ago when that feature still worked. But these days, most or all of your next-gen firewalls and all of your security devices are already expecting HTTPS. And you may find that behind the scenes, your devices already know that you're visiting that open proxy site, even when using HTTPS. And in fact, in many cases, your next-gen firewall will be performing SSL decryption. So it is examining your HTTPS traffic to see where you happen to be going so that it can then set security policies on that. But not something that would be used in a modern world, and it's not a good option for this particular answer either. We also have a jump server. Jump servers are often used to gain access to a device that is on the inside of a network. For example, if you were a managed service provider, you would connect to a jump server, which then would allow you to SSH into a company's internal servers. That jump server would be obviously very, very secure. You would need multiple factors of authentication. It would be very hardened so that only people who are authorized are able to access that jump server. We also have port security. Port security is used on switches to be able to allow or prevent somebody from connecting to the network. That wasn't the situation we had here with URL filtering. And then 802.1x is an authentication method, network access control, we often associate with 802.1x, so that you have to first provide a username, password, or other authentication factors before you are able to connect to someone's network. So that would not be the scenario we're dealing with here either. The best answer in this case, the one I think that most of you chose, the one I would go with, is indeed open proxy, and 55% of you got that one absolutely correct. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I'd love to send you an email that certifies that you were here to watch this 1-hour webinar category, and I would be able to give you that CEU. The way that you would earn this particular email is to follow these instructions. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There is a Contact Us link on that part of the website. That will bring up a form where you would put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put November 2024 Security Plus. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, Open Proxy Jump Server. Open Proxy Jump Server are the super secret code words of the month. Again, the way that you would earn that CEU, get an email from me, you would go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, put your email address. In the subject line, please put November 2024 Security Plus, or something close to it. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, Open Proxy Jump Server. And then it will take me about a week to turn these around, but I will send you an email that has been digitally signed by me that certifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. That is exactly what we would choose. Let's do another question. We do have some time, so we should be able to get through a couple more. Let's see if we can get through this next question. And it asks, here we go. This is another attack type question. It says an attacker has attempted to use the well-known Log4j vulnerability against a company's public web server, but the attack was blocked before it accessed the server. Which of the following logs would show this blocked data? Would it be web server, IPS, load balancer, device endpoints, or DNS? Got a few options there to be able to work through. An attacker has attempted to use the well-known Log4j vulnerability against a company's public web server, but the attack was blocked before it accessed the server. Which of the following logs would show this blocked data? Would it be web server, IPS, load balancer, device endpoints, or DNS? This is one where you can lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA and locking in what that answer might be. Let's see if you know what this one happens to be. There's obviously a lot of different places where you can gather log data on your network. All of these certainly have log data that you could pull, but only one of them would fit this particular scenario. So make sure you are familiar with these different devices, what they can provide, where they sit on the network, and the type of data that's inside of their logs. That might be something that is asked of you on your exam. Very similar to this question and being able to work through it. This particular vulnerability is not necessarily one that you need to know a lot about, but it was a very popular vulnerability when it was introduced because it gave such a dramatic access, easy access into a lot of different devices. And hopefully you're already familiar with what any type of vulnerability can do on a network. This is just one of many. And in fact, even though this is a vulnerability from probably more than a year ago, this particular vulnerability is still being used on different machines. I still see people trying to access devices on my network when you see that happen, and they're trying to use Log4j. They're hoping to find one machine that was not patched that they could then use. And that I don't have one of those for you. So sorry, you're not getting in. You can imagine I have quite a bit of security on my side. Coming from a cybersecurity role and understanding what the bad guys can do to gain access and looking at the security that has been on, I've worked on some of the largest networks in the world and some of the largest companies in the world. I've seen what their IT security is about. I've seen what they've done to protect their systems. And I think I've been able to shrink that down into a type of configuration that's very similar in functionality, but fits the size of our web server quite nicely, and everything else that we have behind the scenes. We have web servers, caching servers, database servers. There's a lot more out there. Load balancers. There's lots there we can work through. So you don't need, the point of that is you don't need to know the specifics of that particular vulnerability to be able to answer this question. This will apply really for any type of vulnerability. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, an attacker has attempted to use the well-known log4j vulnerability against a company's public web server, but the attack was blocked before it accessed the server. Which of the following logs would show this blocked data? Would it be web server, IPS, load balancer, device endpoints, or DNS? Let's see how you did with this one. We'll stop the poll and see what answers are. Another good, strong set of answers, but are they the right answers? The question is one that certainly could point towards an IPS, and 80% of you chose that answer. But there are other answers here that you chose. 5% said DNS, 8% said web server, 3% said load balancer, and 1% said device endpoints. So let's see what we think the right answer is in this case. If we're getting a log and it's showing us a well-known vulnerability, and it's telling us that it was able to be blocked before it accessed anything on the inside of our network, then that is very clearly in the role of an intrusion prevention system, an IPS. This is a very common scenario where we would have an IPS that is on the outside of our network. Often it is integrated into a next generation firewall these days, and it is sitting there and watching all of the inbound traffic to our network. This IPS knows what all of these well-known vulnerabilities are and understands what type of traffic would be seen if someone was attempting to take advantage of these known vulnerabilities. And because of that, we are now able to block it right there at the IPS, or the IPS function within the next generation firewall. That means that all of the logging there is going to be on that IPS, because that traffic never made it to the inside of your network. And because it never made it to the inside, it never hit the web server. It was never on a device endpoint. And it certainly in this particular case would probably not be in the load balancer either. That's usually on the inside of your network as well. We also have DNS, domain name system. Your DNS server is a great place for certain types of security. And certainly there are a number of security features available in a DNS. But for this particular problem where it is a known vulnerability, it is being blocked before getting inside of your network, that falls very squarely into an intrusion prevention system, IPS, and that is exactly what we might have in this case. These days, and the folks in the chat room are even mentioning this, that where do you even find an IPS these days? Well, you don't. IPSs these days are very unusual to find one that is a standalone system. Most often an IPS is now a extra feature or function built into an existing next generation firewall. That's one of the benefits of next gen firewalls, is that this IPS functionality is inside of that single device. We don't have to have a separate unit, a separate device we would have to purchase, a separate device we would have to maintain, a separate device that's using power. There's a lot of advantages for having that functionality within a next generation firewall. And these days, you find it in many, many different kinds of firewalls. IDS, back in the day, there were original intrusion detection systems that were able to identify and alert on problems like this, but were not able to block it. Obviously, that has limited functionality. There have been times when I have had customers that have wanted to integrate their next generation firewall. They've wanted to get alarms and alerts about these known vulnerabilities, but they did not want to block them. And there are a number of different reasons for that. Some people are concerned about blocking legitimate traffic. That's a valid concern. But these days, you don't commonly see that type of false positive with a more modern IPS. And sometimes they are not allowed to. Sometimes the business themselves have said, we don't want you blocking anything. for better or worse. This is what happens sometimes. And so they will put the device into an intrusion detection mode where effectively they're logging everything. And they're, of course, looking at the reports on that, but they're not blocking anything. And maybe this is one where they just want to become more familiar with it. And then after collecting data over a couple of weeks, they'll start turning on the protection capabilities. It's nice to have that flexibility at least. And indeed, in this case, that's exactly what blocked this traffic. It would be an IPS intrusion prevention system. That's what you would find on this particular network, certainly. Let's do one more. Let's do a couple more. We got a little bit of time here, and I think this would be a good one to do next on this list, where the question asks, a company assigned an MSA. Which of the following would be the most likely next step? Would it be perform a tabletop exercise, hire a third party for professional services, move the data center to a disaster recovery site, increase the throughput of the company's primary internet link, or no public comments about the contents of the document? We have 5 different scenarios there. A company assigned an MSA. Which of the following would be the most likely next step? Perform a tabletop exercise, hire a third party for professional services, move the data center to a disaster recovery site, increase the throughput of the company's primary internet link, or no public comments about the contents of the document. See if you know what the answer is on this one. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will see if you are familiar with this particular set of acronyms or acronym. There's only one really in this list, is it? So we'll have to figure out the details of this, see if you are familiar. And if you aren't familiar, just take a stab. Just take a guess. That's what you should be doing on the exam anyway. If you run into a question like this, is always guessing. Never leave anything out never leave anything blank on your exam. Not what you want to do there either. So make sure you are very familiar with the different options on your exam and how you should be working on your exam to get through it. Another good way to approach this one anyway. A lot of you locking in your answers a little bit slower on this one. No Googling. Stop with the Googling. We're going to pretend that Google does not exist. And on your exam, Google does not exist. So there you go. That's one where you may want to kind of break this one out just a little bit and see how you do with this. Right. I don't know what you're talking about. What? Google? I don't know what you mean. So we'll have to see how you do with this one. The question again asks, a company assigned an MSA. Which of the following would be the most likely next step? Is it to perform a tabletop exercise, hire a third party for professional services, move the data center to a disaster recovery site, increase the throughput of the company's primary internet link, or no public comments about the contents of the document? Let's see what you chose. I'm so curious. Let's find out how you did. Oh, we're all over the place. After your 80% offerings, your 55%, we're now a little torn. In fact, we almost hit double digits for every single answer. 35% say hire a third party for professional services. That was the plurality of you that answered that one. We have 23% that say the answer is no public comments about the contents of the document. We have 19% that said perform a tabletop exercise. 11% said move the data to a disaster recovery site. And 9% said increase the throughput of the company's primary internet link. That is what we were looking for. And this is one of those fits this particular scenario of an MSA. Well, MSA stands for a Master Service Agreement. This is an agreement that is created initially that describes a broad set of contractual things that both sides want to have happen. It's something that sets a foundation for future contracts that are being created. So a lot of the hard work goes into the negotiations behind the MSA, because the MSA is one that we will use to perform a lot of other contracts on top of it. So we'll lock down, for example, we'll say that any future efforts with this particular contractual agreement would result in a 5% payment to company A. There you go. And by having that percentage locked in as part of the MSA, you could have other agreements between the companies and everybody knows what that additional payment is going to be. Everybody knows there's a 5% difference. There's a 5% that needs to be paid there. So that's a very good example of how an MSA can streamline things later on, especially if you're trying to do something like a statement of work, an SOW. Very often you'll see a master service agreement and a statement of work sort of combined together. So the MSA is negotiated initially. Maybe we come up with your hourly payment over the next year is going to be $50 an hour, $100 an hour, $200 an hour, whatever it happens to be. You get to negotiate that. We're going to pay you $100 an hour for any services you provide for us in the next year. Great. We'll sign that. Everybody's signed up, $100 an hour. We're locked in for a year. Now we want to have somebody come in and perform some services. And it's going to take 10 hours to perform that service. We already know what that's going to cost because we have an MSA in place. We know that's 10 hours times $100 an hour. That's how much we need to pay. We refer to this more updated project-oriented set of tasks as a statement of work, SOW. Sometimes you'll refer to this as a work order, WO. So this will refer back to the MSA and say, we need you for 10 hours. We need you to perform a upgrade to our firewall. It's a 10-hour project, and it's based on the requirements that we built out of the MSA. Yes, done. We don't even have to sign and have another set of contracts back and forth. We simply sign the statement of work. Everybody agrees on what the work will be. The 10 hours is done. It's paid off at $100 an hour, and we're finished because we already have all of this paperwork in place. That's what we were looking for. A master service agreement is going to help us when we want to hire a third party for professional services. This is something that you will certainly be part of at some level when you're working in the world of IT security. You're going to third parties all the time for expertise and help. And you will either be the one that has helped negotiate the MSA, or you're the one that's writing the statement of work and bringing folks in to help you with your firewall upgrade, for example. It would not be no public comments about the contents of a document would be something along the lines of a non-disclosure agreement or an NDA, not an MSA. So unfortunately, the 23% of you that chose that one, you were probably thinking of a non-disclosure agreement instead. 19% said perform a tabletop exercise, which is certainly useful if you are going through the process of disaster recovery or you'd like to test some of your disaster recovery processes and procedures. That's useful, but it has nothing to do with a master service agreement. 11% of you said move the data center to a disaster recovery site. That means we had a disaster. We need to move everybody. That's a big deal, but it really is not associated with a master service agreement. And increasing the throughput of the company's primary internet link, we usually don't have a master service agreement associated with that because that implies that there will be additional sets of statements of work coming later. Usually that's a single contract. Let's increase the throughput. Let's take it up to a gig. Here's how much it will cost a year, and you're done. There's nothing more you need to do at that point. There's no additional services. There's no additional statements of work that need to be created. So in that case, it would not really apply to an MSA. The one here that would be the most likely next step would indeed be the one that 35% of you chose, hire a third party for professional services. That's the answer we were looking for. That one is absolutely correct. Well done. Well, it's a really good example of how some of these different acronyms, especially these contracts and other types of systems, are super valuable. And I think if you're someone who is getting into the world of trying to understand if you're ready to take this exam, then you indeed might want to go through the process of understanding if you really are ready. And one of the best ways you can do that is to test yourself. But you need to test yourself with questions that are written specifically in the same tone, the same style, the same complexity, the same difficulty level as the actual exam. And as I looked around the internet, I didn't find a lot of resources out there that match that description. In fact, I found a lot of resources that were either outdated, asking information that wasn't even in the latest set of exam objectives, or in some cases, the answers were completely wrong. So what I thought I would do is create a set of questions that really did best represent the actual exam experience. And we did that with our Security Plus Practice Exams book. This is a 381-page book. This is a big book that is nothing but questions. 3 separate practice exams inside of this book. Each one of these practice exams has 90 questions in each one of them, the same as the actual CompTIA exam. There are 5 performance-based questions at the beginning of each of these. So in that 90 questions, 5 of them are performance-based, 85 of them are multiple choice, which again, very similar to the distribution you would get on an actual CompTIA exam. But the real part, the part that I find is probably the most important part, is that it has a similar look and feel to actual exam questions, and I added a few extra features. Let's do a question from my practice exams book, and I'll explain to you what I mean. In this question, same rules apply. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, we're going to look at this question on my practice exams book. This is from Practice Exam A on page 25. This is question A75 that asks, which cryptographic method is used to add trust to a digital certificate? Is it steganography, hash, symmetric encryption, or digital signature? So very much in the same feel and style as an actual exam. And one of the things that you'll notice in my practice exams book is there are not these odd answers being thrown in. Each of these answers is in the official exam objectives, which makes it a little bit more complex to be able to work through. Now, the answer to these, if you just want to know whether it's A, B, C, or D, you can flip over to page 33. Again, we're on page 25. But if you want the details, you would go to page 113. That's one that's very useful. Now, this is a PDF, so if you did want to annotate some of this information, you're trying to make a note on the screen, or you think you know what the answer happens to be, you can either use your mouse or your stylus to update this. It's not locked down. You have complete control over what happens in this PDF. And in this PDF, I have built in a number of different features. Let me go back to that screen. There it is. A number of different features where you can simply jump straight to page 113. So I'm going to click the details, and it moves us immediately to page 113, where it repeats the question and the answers. And then it tells you that the answer is D, digital signature. And it tells you why this is the right answer. Not unusual to something you might find anywhere else. Part of my problem, though, with questions and answers like this, especially in these books and online resources, is that if I get the answer wrong, I'm often left with nothing. It doesn't really explain to me why I got the answer wrong. There's no feedback. It's almost like I've missed an opportunity to learn more about what I don't know. But in my book, every incorrect answer is fully documented. So you can go into this list and you can absolutely understand if you chose steganography, here's why it would not be steganography. If you chose hash, you know why the answer is not hash. If you chose symmetric encryption, now you know why the answer is not symmetric encryption. So this closes that loop, that learning loop, so that if you did get a question on your exam about steganography or about hashing or about symmetric encryption, you've now learned a little bit more about those topics just by going through this individual question. And that's why I often tell people, even if you chose D, digital signature, make sure you read through some of the other ones as well, because it will help you if you happen to run into those topics on your actual exam. And if you just don't know anything about any of this, if the terms don't make sense, if you don't recognize the data, if you're trying to figure out what a digital signature really is, there is a link at the bottom. If you have the physical book, those QR codes are built into the physical book. There they are at the bottom. And you can go straight to the video that explains and describes this particular question. This is from Objective 1.4, hashing and digital signatures. That is exactly where you would go. And if you just want to type it in, I have a quick link that you could type in to get to that same video. And once you're done, many of you may not even know this, in your PDF reader, you have the option to have a back button. Mine does. And it takes me right back to where I started. And I can go to the next question that's on my list. That is my practice exams book. It is available on my website. There's a PDF version. That's the one we just saw. And there's a digital version. By the way, if you purchase any of the digital versions, you get or if you get the physical version, you get the digital version for free. So you can download that immediately while you're waiting on that to be delivered. And if you purchase more than one of these, for example, you purchase the course notes and the practice exams together, there's a little bit of a cost break. It's a little bit, you save a little bit of money. Those are all available on my website. Go to professormesser.com/securitype for more information. Well, one of the things that you've noticed throughout this study group is there has been a constant amount of references to the CompTIA exam objectives. This is the official set of objectives that is provided by CompTIA. And this is important because it tells you everything you need to know about being able to answer questions from this particular exam. So if you're ever wondering, do I know everything I need to know before walking into that exam room? Have I studied every topic that is expected of me? And what are the topics that are expected of me? You might start when you're working through it and be able to understand more about what the different topics are that you need to study. You might want to do that before you start your studies. It's in the exam objectives. This also, by the way, is available for free. So go to professormesser.com/objectives. You can use that link to go over to the CompTIA website, or you can go to your favorite search engine and type in CompTIA exam objectives. That would be a great place to go to be able to download this latest set of Security Plus exam objectives. It is a valuable tool. Make sure you put that into your toolbox for your studies. That will be something that can help you quite a bit when you get to that point. We do one of these study groups for Security Plus every month. We do have study groups already scheduled for December. Because this is a holiday season, you'll notice that our study groups for December are all happening there near the beginning of the month. For example, our A+ study groups are on December the 2nd and December the 6th, an unusual Monday-Friday pairing. We have our Network Plus study group on December the 10th, and our Security Plus study group is currently scheduled for December the 12th. Another thing that I'll also mention is that these dates can sometimes change. So always check the calendar that is on our site. Go to professormesser.com/calendar, and you'll be able to know exactly when the next event is going to be. If I need to change this, I change it in the calendar first. I also change it in our Discord events channel. So both of those are always updated in tandem so that if anything ever changes, you will be the second one to know. And you'll be able to go out there and know immediately if we're still having the study group on that day or if that day happened to move. And if you're watching this video months from now, then you'll certainly want to go to professormesser.com/calendar, find out when our next live event is going to be. Well, speaking of live events, we've made it through an hour of this study group, but don't worry, there's more to come. Stay right where you are. Do not move. We will be starting our after show in just a few moments, where you will be able to ask me any question you happen to have about technology, certifications, or really anything that you happen to have on your mind. Stick around for that. Don't forget about our connections to our other locations at professormesser.com/Twitter and professormesser.com/Instagram to get your weekly Security Plus pop quiz question. We also have our professormesser.com/YouTube channel. That's where all of our Security Plus videos are. If you really want to help us out here, one of the ways you can do that without spending a dime is just subscribe to our channel. Go out to professormesser.com/YouTube. We'd love to have you be a part of that community. And of course, we're adding new videos out there all the time. We've also got our Vouchers and Exam Hacks ebook on our site. Learn more about that at professormesser.com/vouchers. And we have course notes available there as well. All the links there on your screen. These are ways that not only can you take advantage of our absolutely free training course that we have available, but also give you ways that you might want to help us, help others in the IT industry get their job or get a better job. Well, that brings us to the end of this first hour. Stick around for our after show. Thank you so much for being here. We will see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. Okay. Let's take a sip. Let's bring up the after show details, and we can get you to submit some questions for the after show. This is the part where first, I don't have to do a lot of prep. It takes me about half a day to create all of the questions and everything that you saw in that first hour. One of the things that's nice is now I can have questions from you that we can answer. We can go to that by visiting that same link. If you go to professormesser.com/QA, you will see on that link, there's a sign, a message, a notice, and it says, you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. We will be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution may not appear immediately. But I will be able to go through all of those submissions, and you're able to ask anything you would like as part of that QA. You simply go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and you will be able to answer or at least submit your question that I can look through and perhaps eventually find your way into and answer this on our live stream. I think this would be good as we are working through the details. The number of you are putting in some great questions in here, by the way. Let's start with one that deals more with timing, more with details for this. So make sure you are familiar with these. We're going to start with one. Let's go to this one from Mark. Mark says, I just finished the first of the 5 modules for the course, and I'm a couple of videos into the second module. Since my wife and I are expecting our first child in April, congratulations, I hope to take the Security Plus exam beforehand. Not a bad idea. That is a very good planning because you're going to be kind of busy after April. So in March, that's a perfect time. Take the exam. He says, do you think this timing is feasible? Any study tips or advice? So I do think it's feasible. I would say on average, I tend to see folks taking their Security Plus certification, and it takes them generally between 2 and 3 months to study for that particular exam. So let's assume the holidays are coming up, so we may extend that out. Maybe it's more like 3 months instead of 2 months. But even then, as we sit here at close to the end of November, we got December, January, February. And that certainly fits into your time frame of wanting this to be done in the March time frame. I think that fits very, very nicely. And as long as you have these beautiful quiet times that are available, you can do your preparation, get the nursery all set up, have all of the baby showers. You've got events that are going on, and you want to be sure you take care of your wife as much as possible during this particular time. You do have a piece of jewelry or something for the birthday, right? The hospital birth, right? Just a little tip for all you kids that are having their first kid. Make sure you give your wife something really awesome when she has just created life for you in the hospital. Just putting it in context for you, nothing you would plug in. This cannot be electrical. Cannot be an oven. It may not be a food. It cannot be a meat slicer. You don't want to, it's not a new dishwasher. That's not what we're talking about. Something for her. Something that is her, something for mom. Not for mom and baby, for mom. That's my little marital. That's my marriage live stream. We're doing that one next. Marriage tips from Professor Messer. Okay. So back to this though. I think your timing is good. I think you've now got a well-structured time to be able to sit down and really focus on getting your studies done. So of course you would do a lot of important things here. You would get your books, your videos, maybe some labs, perhaps some practice questions. Use all of those to be able to be ready to take this exam. I think if someone is working along the lines of earning their Security Plus certification, it does take a lot of study. Some of this information is interesting to read through. There's interesting stories that go along with it. There's not a lot of great stories about master service agreements. There's not a lot of interesting topics. So some of it does get a little bit dry at times, but it's still important information you need to know for your exam. So you want to be sure you are ready for whatever scenario that might bring. I think your timing is good. Congratulations on what will be an exciting time in your life. It is, people tell you it's life-changing when you have your first kid, because it is, but you just don't understand just how life-changing it really, and in the best possible way. So congratulations and best of luck with that. And thank you for the question. Let's do some more questions in here. There was one that came through I thought was pretty good. And in fact, I want to find this before I bring these details up. I, of course, have my course available here. So when people ask questions that we might want some visual feedback on, I want to be able to give you that visual feedback. And I think if you are ever in a scenario where you're trying to kind of break down some of these challenges, this is the one that I wanted to bring to you based on this question. So if we go to this question, this is from one of my favorite people who is anonymous. And anonymous says, can you explain what a birthday attack is? Birthday attack is not when somebody shows up to your birthday party that was not invited. Something different. We'll talk about it. I read the CompTIA Security Plus official study guide and watched your Security Plus playlist, but I'm still having a bit of trouble understanding it fully. Thank you. Well, if there's nobody better you can ask than someone you've already watched the video from and completely missed on the video. So we're going to give it a shot anyway and see how you do with this one. Let me bring up my details for a birthday attack, because if you think about a birthday attack offhand, it doesn't make sense. But then once you think about it more, it does make sense. I hope that's been very helpful for you. This is one that it says, if you have a classroom of 23 students, 23 people that are in there, what is the chance of 2 students sharing a birthday? And interestingly enough, of these 23 students, the chance is 50%. Just about, just under. Maybe it's just over, but it's around 50%. If you had 30 people in the class, the chance goes up to 70%. Now, looking at a classroom of 23 students, you're thinking there's not going to be much of a choice, but it's not you having the same birthday as one other person. It's that, do you have the same birthday as 23 other people? That increases the percentage quite a bit. And if there's 30 people in the class, all 30 have a chance to match with any of the other 30. And that's why the chance goes up to 70%. Now, the reason we have this thing called a birthday attack, and the reason we mention that particular interesting and not completely obvious statistical piece of information, is that it goes back to cryptography. Because if you have this similar scenario in cryptography where you're trying to create a unique hash, and you find that the hash is one that can be duplicated with different entries because of the statistics associated with that, we refer to that as a hash collision. We were talking about collisions earlier in that first hour of the study group. So sometimes an attacker will go through this process of trying to identify a hash collision so that they can take advantage of that by creating their own certificates, performing their own digital signatures, and performing it in a way that would verify the digital signature is valid, but in reality, it was created due to a hash collision. And so that's why the term birthday attack is so important and why we bring that up as part of what we do. That's why it is not so straightforward. If you were just thinking, do I have the same birthday as someone else in the room? Well, that's a relatively low percentage. But when you look at every other person in the room, maybe matching to every other person in the room, that's why the numbers go up. So it's not very obvious. You're absolutely right. It is a challenge to kind of break that down and figure out the details, but a birthday attack is mentioned in the CompTIA exam objectives, and you should absolutely be familiar with it and how it is applied into the world of cryptography. We only need to know it at a very high level. We don't need to know the math behind it. We don't need to know the algorithms that are used to calculate it. We don't even have to spell out what the formula looks like. Although it's interesting. If you were to Wikipedia birthday attack, a lot of great statistics in there, a lot of great formulas are in there, and you will immediately know whether this is something you want to learn more about or not, because it really goes into a lot of detail. So fortunately, thankfully, on the Security Plus exam, you don't need to know the math. You just need to understand how the math is applied, which, by the way, is basically my life. I don't understand how cars work under the hood necessarily, certainly not these days. I used to be able to keep up when they were just carburetors and we could have fuel injectors and we had spark plugs. I was with you. These days, I have no idea, but I don't need to know. So this is another scenario where you don't need to know the cryptography or behind it. You don't need to know the formulas, but you do need to know how it is used, how it is applied. So pretty useful to have that. So birthday attacks, that's why we have that option for birthday attacks. That's why we deal with understanding birthday attacks, and that's why it's part of the exam objective. So thank you for that question. Let's do some more in this list. We'll keep going down the list of the ones that you have created here. We got a couple and see if that is the case. I've got a lot in the questions you are sending. And if you would like to submit a question into this list, I would be glad to look at them. Simply send it to the link that's at the top of your screen when you visit professormesser.com/QA. There's a little tab right there at the top where you can submit all of those. We talked about this a little bit in our question earlier, but I'm going to give you a little more detail here. I may be able to even pull a few things up that we could look at. Mark asks, can modern security tools employed by organizations detect if one of their users is trying to circumvent their URL filter settings by using an open proxy? And I gave you a little bit of that story at the end of that question, but I really wasn't able to go through a lot of detail. So let me give you a scenario where we generally saw most of these happening were environments, obviously, where there was a lot of filtering going on. Now, in many organizations, I would say most organizations, certainly large public and private corporations, there does not tend to be a lot of filtering. Very often, an organization has a philosophy around filtering data. They may say that our network is completely open. You can go to any website you want on the internet. The only thing that we might filter out are things that we might consider to be inappropriate for work. And that might be, in some cases, not even that. Some companies just have it open and available, and they rely on the managers of the people on those networks to be able to properly manage their people. And that's usually how most organizations work, quite honestly. But there are certain organizations that want to have more control of this. And when you get into organizations that do a lot of filtering, a very good example of this is organizations like a school system, K through 12 here in the United States, which would be your primary, intermediate, and secondary school systems up until high school graduation. And those school systems don't just filter, they are mandated by law to provide filters that will prevent students from going to harmful websites. So websites that might have weapons, might have inappropriate content, might have adult type content, might have gambling information. These are things that we don't want our kids to filter and search through when they're at school. But we do want them to be able to visit educational sites, visit sites dealing with news stories, things that will help them on their educational journey. So URL filtering is a type of content filtering that can be used to do that. And I mentioned earlier, there's groupings of these. So we would group together all of the URLs that deal with sports, and that would be one category. And we can tell our URL filtering either allow people to visit a site dealing with sports or filter out and prevent someone from visiting a site with sports. Do the same thing with gambling. Do the same thing with shopping. Do the same thing with weapons. So you've got a lot of different filters and categories that can be used for something like that. Now, this question specifically asked about an open proxy. Now, how do you know if somebody is visiting an open proxy? Open proxies are generally something you would access from your browser. And from let's see if we can find something that is a relatively benign open proxy scenario, the first thing I will tell you is open proxies are very insecure environments, because the open proxy is a middleman. They are sitting in the middle of a conversation, which means they can inject and add or modify any of the data that is being sent to your device. That means they could inject anything into that data flow, and that certainly becomes an issue. Now, there are open proxy sites and sites that deal with open proxies on the internet all the time. Let me give you an example of one of these. So please do not visit any of these. Almost all of them have some insecurity associated with them and could certainly infect your device if you were to connect to those. But there are sites that list out open proxy servers. They give you the IP address, the port number, and you can access it with your browser. So that's a really good example of how a student can easily search for an open proxy, use that IP address, connect to the open proxy, and circumvent the security tools on the network. So how would a security administrator now manage and prevent this open proxy use on a network? One of the benefits of a next generation firewall is that it can understand not just port numbers, not just IP addresses, but it can also understand the application itself, down to the level where some next generation firewalls can understand a sub-use of an application. For example, if you're going to Facebook, you could allow someone to view Facebook, but you could also tell your next generation firewall, prevent anybody from posting on Facebook. So it's a very good example of how they aren't filtering Facebook out completely. They're allowing you to view that information, but you're not able to post to Facebook, because the next generation firewall not just understands, oh, you went to Facebook, that's Facebook communication, but I can change what you're able to do in that application because I am a next generation firewall. Same thing applies to open proxies. There are many different types of open proxies using different protocols and different methods, but many next generation firewalls will have a group of 20, 25, 50 different open proxy applications that they understand. And you could simply say, enable that open proxy, but disable that one and disable that one and disable that one. And it doesn't matter what IP address it's located at. It doesn't matter what port number it's using. Next generation firewalls don't care about your port number. They don't care about your IP address. They know the application itself. And so they are able to simply block that open proxy application because they know what that open proxy application looks like when it's going across the network. Really a remarkable technology, and one that when it was first released, nobody believed. Nobody believed that technology could do that. And now it's just normal. That's sort of how most new technologies work, isn't it? Very good example of where you would run into and filter out open proxies, which is different than filtering out URLs. In reality, you probably want to combine those things together, because at some point, someone will categorize that open proxy, but in the meantime, we want to block it however we can, and that's perfect for a next generation firewall. Let's keep going through this list of questions that you have sent. A lot of good stuff here. I'm going to filter through, and if you would like to add your question to this list, you can always do it by visiting the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can lock in your question, or at least submit your question, and I'll be able to see it down here at this. And this very good example. Let's see. And in fact, your firewall, a lot of folks in the chat room going, well, does that work with Tor? What about VPNs? Does next generation firewall, can it identify when it's Tor traffic, which is the onion router, TOR? Can it identify Tor traffic? Is that different than someone who's using 1.1.1.1 VPN? Is that different than NordVPN? Is that different than pick another VPN? Yes, it can. Many next generation firewalls can recognize broadly VPN usage, and in many cases, the specific VPN application that's being used. So you can allow or prevent. That's another great way to circumvent security controls, by the way, is to VPN out of that network to a site which doesn't have these security controls, and then you can go wherever you'd like. But if you're blocking the VPN, you can't use that. If you're blocking the reverse or the open proxy, you can't use that. So you have other options there when working through that. You're limited. Next generation firewalls are powerful machines, powerful controls, and you can adjust and prevent almost any type of traffic that you're looking to prevent. Very, very powerful being able to make that happen. That was one of the funnest products to represent as a Palo Alto Network Systems engineer. That was just every time you walked in a door. Could you imagine having this device that had complete visibility of everything? It saw everything on the network. And now imagine bringing that into a company, a large corporation that has never had this on their network before, and plugging it in for the first time. Oh, the stories that I could give you of what we were able to see on people's networks. Maybe some of you watching were some of the folks I was talking to at the time. Yep, we all know, right? One of the great parts is we would have it run we'd set it up, have it run through their network traffic, their internet traffic. We go to lunch. We'd come back. So it's only about an hour and a half has gone by. And there was a thing we could do on the firewall to create a report that would summarize everything that it saw during that time frame. I plugged it into an application that we wrote internally to kind of summarize the high points. It would pick out all of the things that were red flags and just presented them in one document. It was remarkable in what it was able to find. We would usually see the stuff very quickly, though. Oh, the stories. And we have interesting things. We've seen people fired while we were standing there for the things they were doing on the network. We have found attackers that were inside the network already that were doing things. We found people doing illegal things on the network, and I think they're probably still in prison today. So it's sort of a common standard day for someone who's working in the world of IT security, though. So that's just something that you would run into all the time. Certainly an important part of that. And something you have to think about. If you're planning to get into this line of work, you will occasionally run into something that is a little untoward. It is a little bit non-standard. And in some cases, it is something that might be illegal. You find yourself very quickly understanding your responsibility and how it is used to law enforcement in your particular organization. So you're often working with the legal team within your company, human resources, the other folks in IT management. And in some cases, it just becomes awkward and difficult. And if it's something that's simply someone's at work and they're looking at adult materials, okay, that's embarrassing. And in some cases, kind of funny, but it's not bad unless it is bad. And then it becomes illegal, and then it becomes a much bigger problem. So you do run into those things very often. You need to be prepared for that if you're planning to get into the world of IT security, because it's an important part of this, and you are doing something good by resolving that particular issue. So you can feel good about yourself. Yes, a lot of people felt bad when things like that would happen. They'd say, oh, no, you didn't do the bad thing. You did the good thing. You just have to keep that in mind. Let's keep going through this list of questions that you have sent. I'm just going down memory lane here, so you have to put me back on track to the questions that you are asking. Let's do this one. This is a pretty good one. You could probably even give me some suggestions, you out there who are listening. This question's another question from my good friend Anonymous, who asks, as someone who just started getting into this field, what are some beginner-friendly projects that I can do? I think these are really good things to think about, not just for your own learning process and understanding some of the topics that you're going through when looking at Security Plus, but I think it's something that can also help you when you finally get into that interview where you need to talk to somebody about the things you have done. One of my favorite home projects dealing with security is to install a firewall that is much more capable than the home office, small office firewall that you happen to have at home. I think many people at our homes have that all-in-one box. It is in some cases, it's your modem to your internet service provider. Very often it's separate, but many times your internet service provider gives you a single device. And that single device can be your modem, say a cable modem, for example, technically a CSU, DSU, but that's a different question for a different time. So you've got your modem. It's also a router because it's performing network address translation and layer 3 routing in that device. It also has switch ports on the back of it. It's also a switch. So we got a switch in that device as well. It's already 3 things. That's 3 things. You've also got some other you got wireless access point built into that device. That's 4 things. You've got content filtering is usually in that device. URL filtering. That's 5 different things. Sometimes an IPS is inside of it. I'm counting 6. So there's sometimes QoS. So it can do quality of service, packet prioritization. There's 7 things. So you can keep adding on to this all in one box. Part of the problem with these boxes, though, is they do all of this. It is a limited amount of functionality. And if you were to look at the configuration, it's a limited amount of information that it gives you and practically no logging. So it may be preventing hundreds or thousands of attacks every day to your network. And undoubtedly it is. Do you ever see that? You do not. You never see that list that is coming through. I would bet in that list of attacks that's being blocked that there's some stories there. Wouldn't it be great just to have that number so that you could be in a meeting with someone, you could be in an interview, and they tell us about a project you've done recently. Oh, let me tell you about the new firewall that I installed onto my network. And by new firewall, I really mean one that is available for you to download and install from a website. We can find there's a number of open source firewalls out there. All you have to do is search for open source firewall. One of the ones that probably would be a great choice for you is pfSense. And I say great choice, not because pfSense is better or not than anything else that's out there, but it has been around for so long that it is well supported in the industry. And if you're working with installing a firewall for the first time, you may want to do this. Now, there are appliances that you can get, not just virtual appliances in the cloud, but you could get actual appliances. There are companies that make firewalls, physical firewalls that are running pfSense. This is one from Netgate, for example. But you don't need to do that. You can run pfSense on your own equipment or even in a VM. So there are other ways that you can implement this technology. But if you have an older system sitting around, and you can use that one as your pfSense firewall. One of the great things about pfSense is I flip around their website real quick. So they have a lot of different options and a lot of different things you can use to plug in and use. But they also have an option you can build your own. They tell you exactly what's required to build your own firewall. What are, in fact, very minimum requirements. The recommended requirements are at least a 1 gigahertz CPU and 1 gigabyte of RAM. I think you could probably do that with an old system you might have sitting around. They give you options for how much that's going to work. If you have that, how much throughput you can get through the firewall. They even give you an option for using this on FreeBSD so that you can install it and it works perfectly right out of the box. So a great thing to use on that website. Go to the pfSense website to find out details for that. And you can then download it and install it on your system. But what's great about pfSense is that it has a lot of functionality and tons of logging and reporting on that device. It also allows you to integrate other capabilities within it. One common combination is to have pfSense as the firewall and Snort as the IPS. And that way you can have both of those running at the same time on the device, going to the logs on that device, where you can keep track. How many times has someone tried to hit your network with that particular vulnerability? And over a 24-hour period, how many times is that? You can almost set up an entire talk in your interview when somebody asks, tell us about a project you're working on. Oh, last month, I installed new software, a firewall software. I installed pfSense. I grabbed an old machine. We installed it on this. I plugged it in. I set it up this way. I configured my internet modem to be passed through instead of routed. It went right into pfSense, and you won't believe what I found. And then you get to talk about all of the reports and all of the attacks and what the IPS was able to find, and the time you found a legitimate attack, and you happen to find a false positive on the IPS, and here's what you did to identify it as a false positive. These are security tasks that we perform constantly on some of the largest networks in the world, but now you're doing it at a home level with effectively the same type of technology, just in home type of traffic. But you're seeing similar things. You're seeing vulnerability attacks. You're seeing how much throughput. You can control different types of data going through your network. You can set up filters and blocks and VPNs and IPsec tunnels, and just keep going. Which is, by the way, exactly what that company's next generation firewall does for them. So there are ways that you can link these things back. And if you are able to talk about this project that you did with the firewall, and somebody's trying to hire someone who is at least familiar with firewalling, that's a good match. And I think if you're trying to get your foot in the door, it's good to have these stories. Other people in the chat room were talking about other types of projects for security that you might want to be interested in doing. Some folks like to do projects where they're doing sort of a hacking style project. This is a bit different than a traditional IT security administrator, which is more of a defensive blue team. The hacking side of things, where you're performing the actual hack, is more of a red team and attacking type scenario, but it is fun. And you do learn a lot about what the attackers are doing so that you can then better set up a way to prevent those attacks from occurring. Why do we need to turn on the IPS? I know exactly why. Why do we need to configure malware detection within the firewall? I'll tell you why. Because if you have that experience, you can apply it back to the defensive side of things as well. Those would be fun to go through. So there are a lot of great hacking, box hacking type services on the internet that you can do all from a browser. Those are also a lot of fun. Some people mentioned building a honeypot. Those are, I would temper that with an understanding of what you are doing when you are installing a honeypot. It's not something you necessarily want to put on your local network. Primarily because if somebody does gain access to the honeypot, an attacker finds their way onto the honeypot, and the honeypot has a vulnerability, the attacker could potentially find themselves inside of your entire network. And that's not what you're trying to do with a honeypot. So although that would be interesting to have a log of that honeypot, I think that may be a task best fit for something like a cloud-based environment. So that may be something to consider. Setting up a honeypot is not an easy thing either. They are relatively complex to set up compared to some of these other things we've already talked about. But once you have them running, they certainly are interesting. And you never know what you may be able to find once you see those logs coming in. There are also some great open logs on the internet of people that are already running honeypots. You may want to look for some of those that may give you some perspective of what you might be able to find. But already, if you're doing pfSense and Snort, that is a great 1-2 punch. That may be a great security project you could work on immediately and be able to create some reports, find out more information about what's going through your network, or see how much of these attackers you're already preventing just by running the reports on your pfSense firewall. Let's do some more questions. I know we're getting near the top of the hour, and I want to get through as many as possible. So let's do that. We'll keep going through that list. Here's another one. And I think this next question is one that I would like to answer with some existing information. So I'm going to quickly do a couple of searches on my side, just so I have an example of this. This is also a common question that comes up about risk appetite and risk tolerance. This is, and I'm going to give this answer to you, or sort of this description to you, in the best way that I can kind of think of, and you can sort of run with this as we go. This is again from my good friend Anonymous, who asks, can you give tips on how to know exactly when a question is asking for risk tolerance or risk appetite? I often can't tell the two definitions apart. Me either. I think most people are in that scenario where trying to understand the terms and how they fit into this world can be complex at times. Broadly, I do have a slide in my video course that talks about risk appetite and how you're trying to determine what is acceptable from a risk perspective. And that is before you start acting on it, how much of this risk can you really accept? That is the appetite for this. The risk tolerance is what the variance of this might be. Those are very generic terms for risk appetite and risk tolerance. And quite honestly, in that context, don't tell you a lot. So let's use it in an example. Let's go drive in our car. Let's go down the highway. And let's say this highway has a speed limit of 55 miles an hour. This is what the government in your area, whether it's your state, local, federal government, has set this as the upper limit as to what is allowed on this particular highway. They've decided that the best possible speed that gets you where you need to go, but maintains safety in this particular road is 55 miles an hour. If you go 55.1 miles an hour, you've broken the law. How many people do you think have received a ticket for 55.1 miles an hour? Not a lot. Not probably very few. Only in the worst possible cases, I guess. In fact, 56 miles an hour, you're probably not going to get a ticket. And in fact, I would say if you were on a road that had a 55 mile an hour speed limit, you're probably able to go a little bit faster than 55 miles an hour, but still not receive a ticket. So you've technically exceeded the risk appetite for that particular road. You are breaking the law, but there's no downside to this. Nobody's taking any action yet. But at some point, when you reach 57 miles an hour, 58 miles an hour, somewhere in there is going to be a line, an invisible line that you cross where suddenly you get the attention of the local constable. Suddenly the highway patrol is aware that you are exceeding the speed limit more than what they like, more than what their tolerance is on the network. They're able to tolerate quite a bit from you. They're able to tolerate 56 miles an hour. They're able to tolerate 57 miles an hour. But their risk tolerance is hit when you hit 65 miles an hour. Maybe at that point, they start pulling people over. And so that is risk tolerant. You're well above. You took the risk. We hit that risk value 10 miles per hour ago. But we really didn't take action until we hit the final risk tolerance level. And in fact, that risk tolerance might change. Maybe we find out another log4j type vulnerability, but this time with Apache web server was found. Well, now everybody's got to patch their Apache web server. Our risk tolerance drops quite a bit at that point. We are not going to allow any bad traffic come into our web server. We need to patch it as soon as possible, and we're going to watch it and make sure no bad guys get in there. But what if it is just a normal day? There's no known vulnerabilities. We might do our normal updates every week, every 2 weeks, our patches every month. But if something suddenly shows up, our risk tolerance certainly changes. We might want to patch much quicker. Same thing for our driving. We might decide that if it's raining, the police officer is going to want you to go a lot slower than you normally would. They have a different risk tolerance during the rain than they do when it is daytime and sunny. So take those different terms of risk tolerance and risk appetite and apply them into that mix. There is context there. There is also variability with this. It may not be a line that you can draw in the sand, but it is certainly something that we use to determine how quickly we react to certain risky environments. And I think you wanted to put it into the world of IT. I think a 0 day is a good example of how that risk tolerance can change depending on what's going on in the world. Suddenly, you're not doing your monthly update. You're patching that server right now. because you're very concerned about what might happen with that particular bad vulnerability that's out there. We have top of the hour, but we can fit in at least one more question. Let's keep going through this list and see what different options you have. Thank you, by the way, for sending these in. For those of you that visited professormesser.com/QA, you are indeed the ones adding this information to the mix and being able to have this here. Let's see if others that we have in this list are something we might want to break down for you. Let's talk a little bit about renewing certifications. And this is from Kenson, who asks, Professor, just passed my exam last week. Thanks for your help. I know I have 3 years to renew. Should I start collecting CEUs from now, or should I wait until I'm closer to the renewal date? Well, this is one that a lot of us think about, especially right after we get certified. For those of you that have not gotten certified with your Security Plus, and first, congratulations, Kenson, on your Security Plus certification. One of the things that we think about right after getting our cert is that the clock is suddenly ticking, because your certification is good for 3 years from the date when you passed your exam. Now, that means that after that 3-year period is up, if you have not renewed your cert, it now becomes worthless. It now is no longer a valid certification. So many people will continue to renew their Security Plus without having to take the exam again. I guess you could take the exam again. That is certainly a valid form of renewal. Boy, that's the hardest way to renew a cert ever. So I don't necessarily recommend that, especially when there are much easier ways to renew a certification. One of the easy ways that a lot of people think about is collecting continuing education units, CEUs. Continuing education units are the sort of a generic currency for renewing a certification on the CompTIA website. So if you go over to the CompTIA.org, right at the top, they have a continuing education section. And in the continuing education section, they take you and step you through, how do you renew? What do you need to know? What is the process? What is the path? And then how do you submit CEUs? But it's not the only way to renew your certification. There are a number of different ways to renew your cert that do not require you to take the exam again, and they do not require you to collect CEUs. Now, in the video description of this video, the YouTube video description on YouTube of this video, there is a link to one of the videos I created called How to Renew Your A+ Network Plus or Security Plus certification in just a few hours. And it describes the process of using CertMaster CE, which is an online computer-based training program that steps you through all of the new things in the certification, tests you online, and if you answer all of the questions correctly, you renew your cert. So it's a little bit easier and indeed much faster than simply collecting CEUs here and there for different things that you do. Now, if you're someone who is in the industry, you're already working in security, you're already familiar with visiting trade shows, participating in live events, you've gone to a number of webinars, you've gone to some additional training sessions, you may be able to collect CEUs just by part of what you do normally during the day. And so you may not need to get CertMaster CE. You may not need to take another exam. You can just collect these CEUs based on the things that you would normally do. But for other folks who are not in that position, they might want to have other options. So I would highly recommend that you go through the CompTIA website, you look through what the different options are. And in the video, I go through the main categories of how to renew your cert. You could take a higher level CompTIA cert. So if you have Security Plus, there are higher level certifications you could take within CompTIA that would earn you another certification and would renew your lower level certifications. That's almost like a 2-for-1 then. If you know you're going to be getting one of those higher level certs, you could do that right now. They do have, when you choose the renewal path on the CompTIA website, you can renew with a single activity. That would be to take a higher level CompTIA certification, and they give you this chart. So for Security Plus, if you were to take Linux Plus, it will renew A+. If you took Cloud Plus, it will renew A+, Network Plus, and Linux Plus, if you take the latest version. If you take CISA Plus, then you would renew Pen Test Plus, Security Plus, Network Plus, and A Plus. So that's one that will renew your Security Plus cert. And CASP would also renew Security Plus. So if you already know that you're going to take CISA Plus or you're going to take CASP, maybe before they change the names, this is going to be one that you will renew your Security Plus certification without having to do anything else. Now, I realize not everybody wants to be able to take yet another exam for that, so the CertMaster CE might be a better solution for that, or collecting CEUs on their own, another great example. And the CompTIA website takes you through what all of those CEUs would be, what's required for each one of those categories, and then you can map out if you really do have enough CEUs to renew. So it's never just any one thing. After all, you can renew using many different things. Make sure you're familiar with what those different things might be, because one might be more advantageous to you than one of the other options that they have on the website. Let's keep getting more questions that you are submitting to me. I know we're at the top of the hour. We can probably fit one more in, right? We could probably get this one in this list. This is one more about the exam itself and working on these sort of the paths that we work through for security. This is one that is from Christopher. Christopher says, as someone new to the field and transitioning into cybersecurity, my main goal is to specialize in digital forensics. Oh, that's a great part of IT security. Would earning the Security Plus certification be a good starting point for a beginner, or would you recommend a different path? This is, I think, where we all think in the world of IT security that there's so many options available. So in this particular example, Christopher says, really interested in digital forensics. And digital forensics is fascinating. So I get it. Other folks say, I like IT security, but I want to do pen testing. I want to do penetration testing. I want to go either on the internet or at that location and do physical penetration testing. I want to do digital penetration testing. That's a whole world unto itself. And very often you would not be a pen tester and also be a digital forensics expert. There's way too much to know about either of those to spend time doing both. You wouldn't be very good at either if you spent time doing both. There's also folks that work in the more generalized IT security type field. So you're managing firewalls, you're configuring IPsec VPNs, you're setting up your multi-factor authentication methods, you are building out secure infrastructure configurations, you are logging everything to a SIM, you're running reports, you're evaluating attack types, you're looking at log files. There's a lot in the world of IT security. Very often we start in that very broad IT security realm. And that is where a lot of people get started in the world, because that's where you really learn a lot about a lot. You learn about firewalls. You learn about the processes and procedures for implementing those change controls. You learn a lot about the intrusion prevention strategies. You learn a lot about getting log files, consolidating them, and correlating those log files together. There's a whole world of IT security there that you were only scratching the surface at that point. And at that point, you might want to specialize. Maybe you want to be someone who only works on next-gen firewalls. Maybe you want to be someone who only does large data correlations and looking for attacks hidden within the log files themselves. Maybe you want to be over on the digital forensic side, where you're able to image different servers, different drives, look through that data for important information to either be able to find information or identify things that normally would not be obvious. And maybe you want to get into the world of pen testing. Maybe you want to go into that world that has its own set of skills that are required to be able to gain access into these systems that normally would not be accessible. So this is why, and one of the great benefits in my mind of information technology in general, is that the IT world gives you the ability to redirect yourself at any time. You just need to have the interest and the knowledge. And the interest is an easy one. Usually it's something that comes naturally. You're working in IT and you think, I'm really interested in that digital forensics side. I'm watching a lot of great digital forensics videos on YouTube. I've played around with some of the digital forensics software. I've loaded up Autopsy on my Linux distribution. I loaded in, and here's what I did. I bought used drives from eBay, took those used drives and imaged them and put them into Autopsy to see if I could find anything. And I did. Found somebody sent me a drive that was not formatted. It was from a point of sale terminal, and I had transactions on it. I had coupons on it. I had images on it, all from running Autopsy on a Linux distribution for free. So there's another project for you, by the way. There's your next project to take into your interview, is playing around with Autopsy and seeing what you could find from third-party drives that you get at a go to your flea market and go grab some drives. I had a box of 12 drives. Many of them were blank. Many of them had nothing on them. Many of them could not be undeleted, but some of them could. Some of them were just there. I didn't even have to undelete. All the data was just there. Just plugged it in and imaged the drive. And that takes you through a different set of paths about how do you do this securely? How do you create the image to begin with without the fear of changing anything on the drive? And then how do you store that image securely? How do you get that image into something that Autopsy can understand? And then how do you use Autopsy to properly find the data hidden within that particular operating system? And of course, Windows is different than Linux, is different than Mac OS, and et cetera, et cetera. Then you get into the world of full disk encryption, and there's a whole bunch of other things you have to worry about. It is not for the faint of heart, but it is incredibly interesting. And the more you learn about it, the more specialized you're going to become in that particular part of this field. And perhaps that gives you some more options on different jobs you might have available in IT. This is perhaps one of the advantages that many of us have in the world of IT, is being able to recreate ourselves, our careers at any time. It's something that sets us apart from other places you might go. If you go, a doctor's not going to be able to recreate his doctoring. He's locked into doing that particular type of doctoring unless he goes back to school for another number of years, which generally does not happen. You don't usually see that in the world of entertainment. You don't usually see it in the world of transportation. You don't often see that in state and local government. But in IT, you can learn about these topics, find out more, dive into them, gain that knowledge, and eventually move into that particular field as part of what you would normally do day to day. That is something that is not available to people outside of IT in most parts, other types of vertical markets, vertical environments. So I think that's something that gives us an advantage when we are working through this. It's one of the things that excites me a lot about IT. It excites me about training people, because the other part of this question from Christopher says, would earning the Security Plus be a good starting point? Well, earning Security Plus is a perfect starting point for anybody who would like to learn more about IT security. That is exactly what that's designed for, so that you understand first the terms that we use. You understand the false positives and false negatives. You understand the non-disclosure agreements and the master service agreements. You understand change control. You understand what all these different security tools are supposed to do for you, from a next generation firewall to an IPS to a proxy, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it gives you that foundation. It starts building that foundation. There was someone recently who said Security Plus is not a cybersecurity certification. It's literally in the name. It's called Security Plus. Plus, I will also mention the term cybersecurity isn't actually a thing. It's just a broad term that we've come up with to describe the use and the application of security on our data. That's really it. It's such a broad term. It really has no meaning whatsoever, unless you ask somebody, well, what do you mean by that? And usually someone will have their own meaning of what cybersecurity means to them. So I want to be able to give folks that first step into the world of security. It was an exciting one for me when I worked for these cybersecurity companies, It was fun. It was interesting. I met smart people doing smart things at some of the biggest companies in the world. And it gave me an approach towards technology that I did not have before. When you learn about security at that level, it really does change how you look at everything wherever you go. And if you ask anybody who works in IT security, they'll tell you whenever you go to the grocery store, whenever you walk into someone's home, whenever you look at wires coming out of a wall and going to a device that's on the ceiling, you're taking notice of that. And you're trying to figure out what's going on there. What do they have going on there? I take pictures all the time of things that are insecure when I go into environments like this, so that later I can put it into my Security Plus course and show you examples of where things are going horribly, horribly, horribly wrong. How could you get that foundation if you didn't have something to give you that primer? And I think Security Plus is a great primer for that, or else I would not have created a Security Plus course for that. So that's where I think it's a great place to start. A lot of people come to my site to go through my Security Plus videos who may not necessarily be taking the Security Plus certification, but they wanted the foundation. They wanted the fundamentals so that they could talk to somebody about hashing and digital signatures and being able to understand how encryption fits into this and what is tokenization and how do I deal with masking and what is all of these things, all of these terms and technologies become incredibly important when you're building the foundation. And I think if you are planning to get into the world of IT security, whichever area of that field you want to move into, I think having that foundation is going to be very important. I will also tell you, if you're planning to get into any one of those other fields associated with security, I think a very strong foundation in networking is incredibly important. Not just from the perspective of how do I plug into a network with this new firewall, with redundant firewalls? What type of routing do we use? What type of switch configuration? Is there a particular setting I need to set up? What are the IP address ranges? What if I need to do an IPsec tunnel to another site? Is that a different routed config? What type of routing config? All of these things become important. And even though you're installing two firewalls, all of those questions I just had were really networking questions. They had nothing to do with the security part of things, at least not yet. So that's why I tell people, get as much knowledge as you can about security, certainly. Start building the foundation. But that foundation better also have a very strong foundation in networking. You need to know a lot about networking. Probably in some levels, you need to be an expert in certain aspects of networking, just so you can apply those into the world of IT security. And I think that's probably my best advice if you're someone who's looking into that field or you're interested in eventually getting into that field at some level. Get as much knowledge as you can about networking, get as much knowledge as you can about IT security in general. And I think that will best position you for doing whatever you want to do next in that particular field of IT security. It is an exciting field. It is a fun field. It pays really well. And all of these things sort of work together. You can then decide what type of life you would like to have for yourself and for your family based on that foundation that you're building. It all applies. All of these experiences that you will have working through and building that foundation will be important. Even if they don't seem like they're important right now, you will find at the end, when you have finally built the foundation, you'll realize, wow, some of that information was much more important than I ever thought it would be. So, of course, if you're planning to get into IT security, that's where you should go. That's the effect. That is exactly the type of work you should be doing. And I would highly recommend Security Plus being that foundational point, and maybe also Network Plus or some other network related certification to go along with it. Both of those work hand in hand, much tighter than probably you might expect. Well, that I think is a great place to finish off this particular study group. I think having those questions are incredibly valuable. Thank you so much for including those in our after show. It's something that when we start putting together what we want to do next on our live streams, I always like that we have that extra hour at the end so we can hear and find out what interesting things you want to be able to hear about. So thank you for submitting those. We do one of these study groups every month. So we have one already scheduled for December. It's not going to be in the end of December like this one is at the end of November. So make sure you check our calendar for when the next event is going to be, or if you're watching this video months into the future, make sure you visit our events calendar on our website at professormesser.com/calendar. After I'm done here, I'll be over on Discord. Feel free to join us on our Discord server at professormesser.com/discord. And of course, if you like this video, it would be fantastic if you could simply reach over to your mouse, give it a thumbs up. You might even want to consider subscribing to our channel as well on YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you in December on the next Security Plus Study Group. Thanks for joining us. See you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. Thanks, everyone.